Adam Bixler. Thanks very much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm well, David. Thank you for having me on.
So I'm very excited to have you on the show today because you have a very unique set of experiences and skill set. And why don't we start with kind of walk me through memory lane? You were part of early stage startups. They got acquired. You were in cybersecurity for many years, and now you are VC investing. So, but walk me through memory lane, how you got to where you are today, just so we kind of clean up palettes.
Yeah, no, certainly. So I got my start all the way back in college. I went to University of Pittsburgh and ended up joining the ROTC program while I was there. But it was also the late 90s, and I didn't realize that Pittsburgh had such a rich history in designing ARPANET, which of course became the internet, which got me into a few different adventures in technology, anything from working on campus with some of the infrastructure there, working with a French website development firm, working with some of the folks that were one of the founders of one of the five first ITNs, information transfer nodes, which was the basis of the internet. Just kind of really brought me into technology a little bit faster than I thought I was going to. Commissioning, looked like
Oh,
you.
I would just pause here for 1 second. If you can, just as a kind of side note, where's your camera?
Right in front of me.
But you're looking at me. You're not looking. Are you looking at the camera?
No, yeah, the
And
camera's just above.
it's hard to do when you speak. It's I am cheating, and the way I'm cheating, I have a teleprompter, so my screen is actually my camera is behind it. So, but
Okay.
if you can, it's hard to do, I know, but when you speak to the camera, not to me, because it
Okay.
comes up to me natural. And I know it's hard to do because again, I'm just asking something that I can't do. That's why I got a teleprompter. But if you can, just every once in a while, remember because it's much more natural. People feel like that you're actually speaking to them.
Okay. All right. So stare at the green dot for the camera, not the
Yes, yeah, and
not.
it's much more now, and it's hard to do. Is you have to almost practice in doing it.
Okay. Okay. Can do.
So let me ask you this. So geographical location seems like was playing a major role. I mean, you were in the midst of the people that you're close to, physically close to people that were designing the internet back there. Is that a
I,
correct
I
statement?
I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't have an appreciation for it, but looking back on it now, the combination of the design of the internet, a lot of the foundational internet technologies around TCP/IP, and a lot of the foundation of cybersecurity actually was born out of right across the street at Carnegie Mellon. So a lot of friends that worked over at SEI doing malware analysis back in the 90s before it was in vogue. I just didn't understand how impactful that was on my career until a couple of decades later, looking back on.
But isn't always the case, Adam? Like the way it works is like, listen, and that's always the case. I think even with life experiences, in the moment when you're going through, a lot of times you don't understand how impactful that is until after the fact.
Yeah, yeah,
And
no,
just
definitely.
like I would say same thing. Like the founders of Google didn't know that they were doing something big, or the Amazon, like whatever. When they were doing it, it, it didn't even seem substantial. Like I was reading somewhere where the somebody who worked at Google in the early days. I think it was the chef or somebody was making food or somebody,
Mhm.
and they got stock options in the company. Later, they turned into be millionaires, but they were like just working in the kitchen there. But back in the day, they didn't think it was going to be you know detrimental to their like a life changing event. So I think it's always the case. Um, Now, when you were close to that, it's what type of interaction did you have with these people on a regular basis, and what was it like? And I'm assuming that you were kind of almost like a sponge. Everything was new back then, right?
Oh, oh, definitely. And that's where, my overlap, either working for the university, uh, you know, jumping in on the most basic of tasks, right? It's help desk operations. It's computer lab consultant. It is, we actually had what were called residential network consultants, folks that would go in and set up Ethernet in the dorms for all the students. It was kind of like similar to an RA program where they'd comp you housing as long as you would help set up the internet. I really cut my teeth early on in trying to learn everything that I possibly could. And then I backdropped that because I knew that service was going to be very important to me, just from a values perspective, which was what aligned me to setting myself up for ROTC and a commission in the Air Force. So I always joke, it was late 1999, going into the year 2000. It's the .com boom. We didn't know it was a bubble yet. And all my friends are aligning jobs, with big tech companies and talking about these huge salaries that they're taking. And I said, I committed to this military thing. I'd really like to do it. I believe it's just part of who I am. And they said, oh, you're not going to make any money. It's going to be horrible conditions. And I said, look, I'm third generation Air Force. I'm going to follow through with this. Those were the same friends that were calling me in 2001, even before 9/11, asking, how do I get a stable paycheck? They'd just get caught up in the bubble. And they just kind of, they wanted that stability. And I didn't do it for the stability side of it as much as the learning and the service side. But it just kind of worked out for me in my career path, in what I wanted to do.
Yeah. It's like slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
And and it's funny because I share a bit of a background with you, almost in the same timelines. I spent not the same Air Force, but I spent time in the Air Force at the same exact years. I spent 6 years in the Air Force as well. And again, while others were riding the wave of the .com boom at the time, it's so interesting. So walk me through like the service piece. And let's talk about that, since you're kind of come from that history. I've talked to a lot of veterans in this show. There's a lot of transferable skill sets. It's quite amazing the amount of training that you get there in a relatively speaking minimal amount of time, and what type of responsibility you all of a sudden get. Like, as a young person, all of a sudden you can be responsible for millions of dollars in infrastructure and potentially even human capital. Talk to me about what you were doing back then and how you acquired some of the skill set that later on helped you in your continuous journey.
But really, it's kind of interesting. My first assignment, I was told that I was going to take an intelligence track and that I was going to have to wait about a year to get my security clearance. So they asked if I would stay on at the university and work as a recruiter, basically officer session programs. And when I came in 2000, it was very small team minded. It wasn't the traditional bureaucracy of what you expect in the military. I was kind of alone and unafraid. They said, go figure this out. Go figure out how to recruit 30 candidates into the program. And what I realized very early on was that we were still steeped in a lot of tradition around paper applications. And I had just worked on some of the largest web development programs, anything from like Western Union's first online money transfer system to a lot of the PepsiCo corporate sites, to a lot of, some original online gaming with large food conglomerate in Europe. I'd seen what the internet could do. So I said, why don't we just put this application online? And I found somebody that, a boss that was willing to let me take a little risk. And within 6 weeks, I actually accounted for 20% of all the applicants nationally, and just completely beat the expectations of what they were going to have from a sessions standpoint for folks looking for scholarship. And it was just kind of then that I realized that, even within such a large structure, I had the opportunity to think creatively and try to do something a little bit bigger. That allowed me to then go on and lobby for additional training, a lobby for additional opportunity and experience that I don't think I would have had otherwise. I mean, this pushed me into what was not an intelligence track, but rather a communications track at the time. Um, and it was a lot of, I didn't want to do it, but the training was really good. So anything from network administration all the way up to a little bit of data center management type activities. And it was really just a matter of, grow where you're planted. My first official duty station was not somewhere I wanted to be. It was a small town in West Texas, not somewhere that a young professional wants to be. But it was, again, you got to grow where you're planted. Look for those experiences. I was able to lobby for additional training in, at the time, everybody's laying fiber optic cable. So I was able to do a fiber optic training. Just those types of opportunities, you've got to find them, whether you expect them to be there or not.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the Air Force itself has a certain attributes. I just saw a quick, I think it was at a YouTube Shorts or Instagram or something where they were making fun of the Air Force, where you see I don't know if you've seen that, the one that jumping over the fence. And so you see the Marine just doing a flip, and in the Army doing this, and then the Air Force just like casually strolling around the fence. So it has a certain attributes, again, for people that are part of that organization. What can you say about, is it really true, or is it or just what they're saying about the Air Force is completely off?
I learned more in my first deployment than I thought I would about the Air Force. So I went active duty a year before 9/11. I was in training when 9/11 occurred. And 10 months later, I was deployed out to Saudi Arabia, helping to build up some infrastructure. And somebody pulled me aside one day and they said, "Look, we're Air Force. We build the golf course first with the money allocated for a base, and then we'll go back and ask for money to build all of the warfighting infrastructure. Whereas, the Marines are going to spend their money on infrastructure for the deployment. Army, same thing. Navy's going to maintain the vessels, but I saw that firsthand. We're more concerned with taking care of the troops first because the troops took care of the mission, as opposed to building out the infrastructure for the warfighting activities."
And I would say something to be said also in the terms of the quality of the people. Not to say that the Army and Marines and all that, but I think the level of individuals that join the Air Force is very high, relatively speaking, I think, compared to other forces. So coming back to the memory lane thing, you were doing kind of active duty, but then you're doing part-time, and then you were also, you kind of glance over a couple of different things. Like you were part of the early stage of building, like, as you mentioned, like some big names, web applications and websites and so on. Then you joined early stage companies, right? You were part of like a few companies. Walk me through that. And then you were part of successful acquisitions, I believe, right?
So my military career was kind of interesting. I had got pushed over to Fort Meade in the early days of Cyber Command, and completely left the mission because it was, again, a very small team centric, limited access, very few people working on it, all driving towards a specific objective. But by 2006, we realized that we had overassessed. Going back to those recruiter days when we brought in more applicants than we were expecting. Following that mini recession after September 11th, we just didn't have the attrition rate. So I was very fortunate. I was bonused to separate and then join the National Guard. I then came back active duty as we were building out Cyber Command. Very thankful for the opportunity to help on the design side of that. But after having done nothing but military and government support for about 12 years, I got bit by the startup bug. I wanted to go do small team innovation again. And that's where it led into, a couple of attempts around some innovation that didn't quite work out until finally landing on forming a team and doing the first venture-backed startup. We raised for that one in 2012.
Was there people that you knew from the military, or how did you get connected to a group of entrepreneurs?
It was so ironically enough, the unit that I was in that was supporting back to a lot of the activities. We used to joke it was an entrepreneurs club. We had all sorts of folks in it that were either high up in private industry or starting their own ventures, and it had a lot of that entrepreneurial mindset that you just don't find in other areas. So I learned from some of the best, just the folks that I worked with that were balancing their military careers with their private ambitions. So it built models for me very quickly on how to do this. So the first team that we went out and were able to get venture backed was actually some concepts that we had thought would work, but didn't really work at the scale of the Defense Department. There was no way we'd be able to deploy it at that level. And I ended up teaming up with someone that had the right background in private equity. He had the right educational background, and we teamed up. We saw that there was a complementary skill set where I had more access to the technologists and some of the problems to be solved, and he had more of the business acumen around getting it started. So we learned from each other, and we were successful in getting that startup stood up.
And I want to double click on something. I recently saw somewhere where the Army and the forces are having trouble recruiting individuals. It seems like this is on the decline. As a veteran, as somebody who's been there, done that, what can you say is kind of, and I would love for people for younger audience to listen to this and say, this is a viable option for me. So from interviewing a lot of people that are veterans, I would say, again, you have opportunities you're never exposed to in a civilian life. A lot of times they pay for you to go through schooling. You get a very condensed experience. Like, I think I would say 1 year in the forces equal to 3 or 4 years in the private sector. And what you just described almost contradicts what the common knowledge is. People think, that it's very structured. It's, the people that just follow rules, like if you've watched Forrest Gump, he was excelling because he wasn't that bright, but he was very good at following orders. But you paint a very different, image of what it is and the experience, as well as we were able to make connections with people that were essentially entrepreneurs. So it's very different. So talk to me about that. Enough of my experience. Talk to me about, just for somebody who's considering what to do next, what can you say to them from your experience?
Yeah, I gravitated towards the military because they had access to the best technology in the world. And this was true, 25, 30 years ago. And a lot of the pushback that I hear from millennials and younger generations is that the best technology is out on the West Coast. The best technology is in private industry. I don't see that anymore. It kind of crosses over into some of our investment thesis. We're seeing some of the best cutting edge technology being acquired by the government right now. And the training and structure that you learn around innovation, the thought processes around how to basically red team a plan, how to look at all the pros and cons. I credit a lot of my product management experience was based in being a military planner. And this goes back to learning the systems, within the U.S. military. It's JOPS, JOP, MDMP, these structured planning processes where you think about an end state and then you work backwards on how to get to that end state. Like those mental models that I was able to build are just, you can't match those in trying to define quarterly earnings or trying to define, how to get the next thing out the door. this is, steeped in, hundreds of years of research on how to win a war. And that mindset transcribes into every team within the military. And it's really, when you think of the military, it's a team of teams, to quote John McChrystal's book. It's how do you start to think about that centralized control and decentralized execution? How do you empower the right size of team to achieve an objective? And it's a mindset that you don't always see in private industry.
And I would say there's also must be a sense of purpose that is greater, is doing something greater than yourself. When you join a private firm, yes, I mean, you're looking at growing the business, making revenue, maybe you're a non-for-profit, so you're serving, but it's relatively speaking a micro goal. I think when you join the forces, it's a macro goal. Like you're essentially, the bigger pictures is that it's a matter of national security. You're protecting everybody, including your friends, your family, and so on. And you're protecting our future of where this country is going, which is a much greater goal. And I think that's one thing that I think that is slightly missing with today's society. We're very individualistic. I think the individualism, the freedom to do whatever you want, and the right to be happy, I guess, it is being stressed. But again, I think we're as a society, we're losing some of our guidance in terms of where we need to be. And I think, I think that's partially, why we're seeing lower recruitment numbers, just because people don't see the greater good. And I think after September 11, while people, you saw, and I don't know why, like maybe like every so many years, maybe there's a crisis that happens and people come back and say that, okay, this is something that we need to do. And hopefully we don't have to get to that. Hopefully that the numbers will improve. So let's talk a bit about, and you're definitely the right person to ask. And I appreciate you answering all my question completely unscripted and being tackled like that. Let's talk about what you're seeing in the cybersecurity industry. One would say that we kind of peaked from an investment perspective in the late 2021 to 22. Like valuation were through the roof, and from a VC perspective, there was a huge influx of finance into the space. But now we've seen kind of a pullback. Talk to me about what you've seen, and maybe like how the macroeconomic environment is changing the way that venture capitalists are seeing and evaluating their startups to invest.
Sure. And I usually ground this in when I raised for my first startup 12 years ago. We had a thesis at the time that there was something bigger coming in cybersecurity. And if you look back at, some of the traditional breaches of, 2008, 2009, be it, TJX, PF Chang's, Home Depot, it was kind of set the precedent that users' personal information was going to be compromised, and credit monitoring was the way out of this. And, the legal foundation here is do care. You're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. What we looked at as transformational was 2011 when Google was hacked. It was titled Operation Aurora. And that was the first time that we really saw a large platform player put at risk because of some type of nefarious activity. And, we used this in 2012 as our thesis to go build a company and try to do something great. So we flew to the West Coast. We said, we're going to be the most East Coast people we know. We're going to show up in slacks and tucked in shirts, and we're going to say cyber a lot. And we got wrapped in a lot of rooms.
I'm sorry. It really is funny the way you describe it, but it's so true.
And at the time, it didn't make sense. And we had one VC pull us aside, and he said, look, you have to look at the buyer side. You have to look at market conditions. At this time, we had McAfee was owned by Intel. Symantec was a platform, and they were the primary provider back to government. Palo Alto Networks had just gone public, and FireEye was about to go public. And we were told by this VC, who specialized in cybersecurity, there's no innovation left. You should go do something in cloud. You should go do something in machine learning, because we weren't quite at the AI level at that time. We said, no, we think something is coming. We think that this is the right place to be. We successfully raised, and that big thing that was coming was the Target breach in 2013. And that was the first time that a CEO stepped aside due to an activity that impacted so many customers. And that was the first point where boards started to take notice. It was really, frankly, what drove our acquisition was that Target breach, because we started to see some of the larger platforms growing, and they were trying to amass talent and capability as quickly as possible. Fast forward, once you get bit by the startup bug, you just keep going. I launched the next one in 2014 after the acquisition of the first one. And we went out to raise, and we did the exact same formula. Got together some old military buddies, put together a concept that we thought was compelling, tucked in our shirts, put on our slacks, flew out to the West Coast to raise money again. And we said cyber a lot. This time we got a little more attention. And what we didn't realize was, investment was on the upswing for cybersecurity. So much so by 2016, we saw one stat that there was more investment in cyber startups than there was enterprise spend. And we started to see that, the space was getting a little bit crowded. We didn't know if the buyer side was going to be able to absorb all this innovation. We didn't know that what the spend levels were going to look like. We drove an acquisition on that company just because we thought that the space was starting to get a little bit frothy. We thought it was the right time. We found the right partner that our technology fit into their platform, and it was a good outcome for our investors. So I believe we made the right decision at the right time. But then going into 2021, the amount of interest, really what I looked at was you have all the economic stimulus coming out of COVID, which pumped $2 trillion into the economy without matching economic output. You had a lot of folks sitting at home incubating new ideas, and you even had folks that worked in cybersecurity looking at what was the next innovative thing that they could build. And kind of all these forces, you've got, friends and family able to make angel investments because they're saving more money because they're working from home. They're going to bet on a family member or a close friend, even if the business plan wasn't sitting behind it. We saw a bunch of institutional investors make their first investments in cyber startups in 21. It was just such an influx of capital. It made the market very crowded. It made it very difficult to understand what were the enduring technologies that were going to win. Fast forward to spring of 22. I think that's when we first started to realize that the investment in the economy didn't match the economic output, and large enterprises started pulling back their spend. They started, having fears of a recession, and we're still feeling that today. Even within the companies that I speak to, their buying cycles on the enterprise side are not that fast. I think there's a combination of factors. There's so many funded startups at this moment. It's really hard to stand out. It's really hard to follow a traditional marketing and sales playbook and get a CISO's attention. It's really hard when you've not done a startup before, and it's really hard when your investors don't have experience in cybersecurity specifically. They're not holding the relationships that help you with your sales cycle. So we do see a lot of companies that took their A rounds in 21 that are not hitting the metrics. They didn't grow into the valuations that they expected that they would. So it's a very interesting time. What I've seen market-wise for a firm like ours, we were pretty deep experience in cybersecurity. I kind of classify, the two types of startups seeking funding. It's those that built a novel concept with a great go-to-market machine, and that great go-to-market machine didn't really work in a constrained economic environment. We have the other side of those companies that are technology first, led by technologists, have built great tech, but just didn't know how to bring it to market. We're kind of leaning towards the latter there because we can help with the go-to-market if the tech is solid. And there is some great innovative technology that's sitting in the market today.
So that was a phenomenal overview of the past several years. Thank you for that. And there's still a lot of change, and it seems like it's cyclical, but cybersecurity is not going away. We are knowledge-based economy. I would say everything is data. Everything from excuse me, from everything is data. Basically, everything spits out information, and the need for cybersecurity is just increasing, not decreasing. And we're becoming more as we're becoming more dependent on technology, so is the need to protect it will increase. And then you throw in the mix a quote unquote machine learning and AI, and all these trends like deep fake. There's tremendous amounts of forces that are making it easier. I guess make it easier for adversaries to deploy, malware, create malware. There's a lot of automation, and so we are under attack. And then to add to this whole thing I mentioned, the geopolitical situation, which potential kinetic warfare that always align itself very well with cybersecurity or cyber attack as well. It creates like almost a cauldron of stuff that will actually float the entire industry again, because again we all need protection. So there's so much to dissect here. Let's start with you mentioned specifically that you're leaning towards the latter, a technology firm that has unique set of tools or innovation in that space. How do you as a VC know that's the case? And because you experienced the flip side of it, a VC told you, oh no, the innovation is already done in that space. You should not be doing this. How do you then evaluate technology on the merit of technology? Like, how do you know what you see is real innovation, or is it strictly maybe a enhancement for something that exists, or the question whether it's a feature or a platform?
It's a great question, and there's no direct answer. It's always it depends. Like everything in security, it depends. What we've seen, kind of the consolidation around platforms. We joke about SIM wars are about to kick off, just because the platforms are aligning. And it's really one of the things that affects some of the more innovative technologies right now is, if you're a really good account executive, you're going to align to one of the platforms because, as mentioned previously, as budgets were a bit constrained, fear of recession, a lot of the purchasing approval authority went from the CISO up to the CFO. It's the CFO that's now making a lot of these decisions. And it's not so much concerned with buying innovative tech as much as it is some of the acquisition processes around it. There's a lot of questions right now. Why am I working with 100 different vendors? And CFOs are starting to realize it's not just the acquisition side, the contracting side of the paperwork, but it's also the labor costs internally to integrate all these solutions into some type of a unified platform. So when the major platform players come in and speak to, convergence, it speaks really well. It also empowers a lot of their account executives to reach their compensation goals, and really there's a balance here of having strong sales and marketing capabilities to also push strong technological capabilities. What we're looking for right now around innovative tech, are you solving a problem that nobody else is thinking about? Are you solving a problem in a way more efficiently than anyone can do today? What are the pain points that you're solving for that customer? And as you talk about, the backdrop here is huge consequences. This is not just about meeting a compliance requirement. This is not just about, proving that you did the bare minimum, or driving a lot of, historically that due care legal standard. We're talking about the survivability of a lot of these businesses, and a lot of this private infrastructure is tied back to national strength. So we look at a lot of what we do is again, values driven here. This is not just helping a company hit their profit margins or quarterly goals. This is how do you maintain that private infrastructure that's part of national strength and U.S. sovereignty. So a lot of the innovation that we're seeing today, it's more a shift around threat-centric understanding and less around vulnerability management. It's more driving the balance between proactive and reactive. How do you set the stage in preparation for the threats that and you can dream up because they're coming? And then how do you actually understand and respond to them and prioritize in such a way? Because we are still dealing with a gap in the workforce. This is it's very hard to break into security as a career. It's very hard to jump in as a tier one analyst and get the training that you need. But how do you train the workforce? How do you bring them in with the right level of understanding? And how do you make them effective operating these tools? Because at the end of the day, this is not a technology issue. This is a living, breathing, thinking human on the other end of the internet that we're dealing with. So how do we empower the living, breathing, thinking analysts on this side to be able to respond?
And we've seen some innovation in the space. I mean, the AI is being thrown everywhere. As there's kind of a joke that now it's the next bubble. Like everybody's talking about AI, and you should have AI. And some VCs are saying, well, is it AI really AI, or is you just kind of shove AI into something that already exists and call it AI? And is that really is it really innovation? Is it, or is just an add-on? So there was a great promise in the Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, to enhance to take that level 1 analyst and make them a level 2 and a level 3, and just by augmenting their work. Where do you find these technologies? Are they really promising? Are they delivering the promise that they're supposed to, or is it still in the infancy?
I believe there's great promise, but the adoption curve is not there yet. We talk to experts in our network, when we talk to CISOs, when we talk to analysts, there's a balance that some of these technologies, some of the AI-centric, chatbots, co-pilots, and assistants are going to be helpful. We've kind of classified a lot of the innovation, the AI innovation in cybersecurity. It's the assistive technology, it's some automative technology, and then there's some predictive and supportive technologies. I've yet to find a CISO that allows automated blocking, though, because there's still that fear that you're going to end up preventing some type of critical business process from happening without a human in the loop. And then the backdrop of this, the AI regulatory environment is still being developed. A lot of the large enterprises we've talked to understand what their AI adoption curve looks like, it's all centered on an appreciation that they must make an investment that is top-down driven from the board and the CEO, but the investments are not around institutionalizing within the enterprise until the regulatory environment's understood. So we don't see a lot of third-party AI integration in the enterprise. We see it in associated technologies developed outside of the enterprise if it's a supporting process, but it's not core to any enterprise yet, because we're balancing the EU AI Act, we're balancing the executive order here in the US on AI usage. We don't understand what the governance, risk, and compliance models are going to look like behind this. So, I think that this is a great time to innovate in AI for cybersecurity, but I don't believe that the buying adoption has happened quite yet.
And you mentioned that the companies are now struggling, the ones that got Series A or fairly small. it's there's the problem is there's so many vendors out there. There's thousands and thousands of vendors, and it's so hard for you to differentiate. And I it's almost like some of the marketing managers or they're steal the verbiage, the vernacular from each other, and then you look at white papers or messaging on the website, and it's very similar in nature. And then depending on what the next flavor of attack, and then it's we can stop ransomware, or we can stop deep fake, or we can do AI. I mean, it's almost like they're chasing the next. It's like ambulance chasers. Every time the solar wind or the whatever the Microsoft Exchange vulnerability or the next CVE, it's a shit show out there from excuse my language, from like a marketing and messaging perspective. How can a decision maker really understand and figure out what it is that, from all that noise, what it is real and what's not? Like, where should I spend the money? Because at the end of the day, they have limited budget and resources. They can't possibly test all those thousands of vendors.
No, it's leading to a lot of analysis paralysis. This is part of the buying cycle that we've seen extend, is because there's more choice. There's more,
and it was long to begin with, right? I mean, I don't know. It was already long to start with.
But I mean, if you look back, 8 years ago, everybody would try to align to a Gartner category or an analyst category. And the idea here was that if you could create a new category, you could own it before anybody else. We saw a lot of category creation in the 2016-17 timeframe, when a lot of the investment started to come in because everybody wanted to be in front of that. Now we see on the buyer side, they're asking for less categories because they need to show back to the board that they're fulfilling the obligations of protecting the enterprise. So on how to stand out, what I'm finding is that the marketing playbooks of 8 years ago, where you just stand up and try to find the 8 to 12 touch points to get someone to pick up your call, they don't work because the CISOs are so inundated with this amount of information being thrown at them. And it's all starting to sound the same. It's driving a lot of the large platform players deeper into those enterprises, broadening with their product portfolios. So a lot of the innovation side that we're seeing, it's relationship based to start, and then becomes word of mouth very quickly. Word of mouth seems to be one of the main drivers in product evaluation these days. And it's because there's a shared trust model. I trust the person that I'm speaking to, that they've looked at a technology. They've looked at that technology because they trust the person that was developing it. And then how do you build that spider web of trust to get more exposure as quickly as possible? And of course, the traditional marketing techniques kind of supplement that, but it's really, cybersecurity is a game of trust. It's how do you build that trusted network of folks that believe in each other, and that, from a values perspective, doing the right thing because it's the right thing.
And do you follow the Gartner hype cycle? Like, the graph, do you follow that? And if you had to put your money somewhere, what technology would you pick? Where on the graph would you be potentially put your money in? Because it's like Wayne Gretzky, right? So you say, well, you got to skate to where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is. And it's really tough to do.
It is really tough to do. And that's where I think that if you look at the way that everybody's invested in endpoint security, you look at the SIEM consolidation. What I'm fascinated with right now is data lakes turning into data swamps in the absence of understanding. Excuse me. In the absence of understanding what's important from a telemetry standpoint, everybody's collecting everything and they think they'll make sense of it later. This data is unstructured. I've yet to see trained LLMs
we know
deal with.
Splunk is doing well. We know Splunk is doing well because of it.
Well, exactly, exactly. But you can point to like the lawsuit against Cribble, that kind of ruined the Splunk licensing model when you start to reduce the consumption and you focus on paring down to what's essential for analysis. So it's the same thing. It's how are people going to make sense of the volumes of data that are being ingested and stored for extended periods of time.
And from a excuse me, from a regulatory perspective, do you have to? Sometimes you have to. You have no choice. You have to store everything. So, in the whole sim, I mean, the notion that you have to store everything, and then after only do the kind of correlation after the fact, and sometimes it takes you weeks to figure out that you're hacked or breached or whatever, and it's already too late. By that time, it's already out the door. So the whole concept of even having a sim to begin with is faulty, or at least it's there's diminished returns on that. Is that correct?
On top of that, what we're finding is so many mixed environments. All the merger and acquisition activity happening at the enterprise level. You don't go in and just have one SIM with one workflow with one alert queue. You have multi-SIM environments. So how do you start to make sense of this data that's in different languages for detection, different formats for alert queuing? How do you make sense? How can you expect an analyst to actually deal with this level of dissonance across multiple platforms? You can't. And that's, what we're seeing is that these analytic platforms that are being classified as hunt, they're the ones that are starting to make sense of this and actually making the analyst's job easier. And a lot of them have some AI capabilities in the background, but it's to support the analyst side. Now it's a matter of understanding how that's going to be adopted on the enterprise
side. And so do you see like this whole SIM consolidation continuing? Is it, or are we going to see yet another category of solution? Maybe they're going to put SIM aside and going to create yet another. Listen, we go through all these cycles. I remember first it was email security, it was data loss prevention. There was the data. I mean, there's always the next big thing where, and then application whitelisting, blacklisting, application firewall. I mean, it's never ending, and we keep throwing layers upon layers of security. And let not just forget that the entire backbone of the U.S. is SMBs. They have no ability to even have half these tools. I mean, we're talking about innovation while a lot of companies have issues with basic security hygiene. They don't have multi-factor. They don't have least privilege. They don't have, even a basic ability for them to even review what's happening in the network. Where are we going with all those different technologies, and how do you, as a VC, position yourself to for the next, because ultimately we'd like to find the next Netflix on the cybersecurity side, right?
Yeah, no, we have a responsibility back to our
right, the 100x to pay the 100x to pay for, for all the rest of it.
But at the same time, this is why I really enjoy these conversations with security professionals. That every security professional that's been in the field for any amount of time, I always joke the best ones are jaded because the basics are not being done. Nobody's doing the basic vulnerability management and patching and configuration control. And, as somebody that grew up in infrastructure first, that this is just blocking and tackling before you can actually talk about the innovation. So yeah, definitely we see plenty of organizations that focus on putting the innovation layer on top of a bad foundation. I am, definitely tracking what's happening in insurance and insurtechs and MGAs. I think that that's going to give organizations the opportunity to outsource some of the higher end risks, some of the things that are least likely but most dangerous, so that we can ignore that and build more of that foundation around the blocking and tackling, the basics, the stuff that needs to be done.
And since you brought insurance, Adam, it seems like getting insurance is now driving a lot of these organizations to to get their act together, because they're like they're now is putting some sort of controls in place to say, well, we are, if you don't have these in place, we are going to insure you, yet maybe the premium is going to go up, maybe not, but potentially our risk coverage is going to be much lower. So instead of getting coverage for X, you're going to be coverage for 1/10 of an X, because now you don't have those in place. So maybe that's a driver. That, and maybe compliance from government to force certain sectors to get their shit together.
Hopefully. And what I'm most fascinated with right now, because you brought up SMB as a segment, when you start to look at the pairing of insurance plus managed services, when you see some of what these insurtechs are doing right now around, your policy costs X, but if you subscribe to these managed services at the same time, we can reduce the cost of the policy. And what they're able to do is bring in a lot of the components of incident response. They have the technical expertise on staff. They have the breach coaches on staff, and they have an understanding of the environment. So they're not just going in and hoping that they're going to find the threat, hoping that they're going to eradicate it, but rather they have, a shared responsibility to come in there and actually handle it. I'm extremely optimistic in the SMB space that the pairing of insurance and managed services is going to have a huge impact on the security position.
And we've seen this in other industries. There's vehicles, if you want to insure your vehicle, if the vehicle has a certain level of security, a certain alarm or whatever, or marking on the parts, or airbags a certain way or whatever, then you get a break. Yes. And also from a track record of for you being a driver, maybe they install I'm not a big fan of the installing the way to monitor your driving. But all of that can be applied into cyber as well, right? Is that correct? I mean, that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. And that's, if you look at historically, the underwriting was done under self-attestation. It was done with a questionnaire, basic checklist of, binary answers. Do you have this technology in place or not? And a lot of organizations would fill those out without understanding what they were admitting to. So, I'm watching insurance and what they dealt with a lot of the ransomware issues of 2020 and 2021. We could go on for hours about that as well. But I think that insurance is getting smarter. They're seeing how to bundle the risk appropriately, how to underwrite it efficiently. I am very optimistic for that space.
Yeah, and we've seen, they're traditionally moving very slow because of the industry as a whole, but I think that they're very good at collectively learning. Mm-hmm. And, just like their actuary tables of, what are the odds of you walking the streets of New York City and falling through one of those, gutters? Because they have tables for that, they have, because they have 200 years of data. Cybersecurity has been around for what, 25, 30 years or whatever. So we're coming into the point where we're starting to collect the data points for them to make decisions. And then the whole industry would value it. Now, from a
David, I'm sorry, I do have to jump over to, I've got someone pinging me on my next call.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we wrap this up, and maybe we can do a part B of this. But before you jump in, just what's the easiest way for thank you very much for joining me. It was very insightful. What's the easiest way for people to reach out to you, to learn more, maybe follow you, maybe provide some insight to that?
No, definitely. So currently over at Squadra, we're a seed stage cyber and defense tech VC out of the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. Somewhat active on LinkedIn, but we are always looking to connect with the next crop of innovative startups. So Adam at Squadra VC.
Adam, thank you very much for joining. And thanks to all who joined, and be safe, online as well as offline. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you again.
David, thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's see here. 99% upload.